A rise in respiratory infections reported on the mainland. Deputy Security Chief says disciplinary forces will help during district council elections. More deaths and destruction after resumption of conflict in Gaza. Good evening and thank you for joining us. The mainland is currently grappling with a surge in acute respiratory infections. The health ministry said it has enhanced surveillance of the outbreak, but no new virus strains or new infectious diseases have been detected for now. Still, in a bid to tamp down the flu surge, the Chinese health ministry has urged people to receive vaccinations. These scenes at mainland hospitals, wards and clinics underline the recent spike in respiratory illnesses in China, especially among children. Some parents lamented how they had to wait for hours at the hospital before their sickened children could see a doctor. Mainland authorities announced a persistent rise in flu cases over the past week. Official data reported 401 cases of cluster infections. Most cases involve the H3N2 flu, a subtype of the influenza A virus, or the so-called Mycoplasma pneumoniae, bacteria that causes mild infections of the respiratory system. The National Health Commission said monitoring efforts are ongoing with relevant departments over winter respiratory illnesses, but no new or unusual pathogens have been detected. The National Administration of Disease Control and Prevention said currently the dominant virus strains are similar to the ones in circulation last winter and also akin to the prevalent strains globally. They added advanced planning on the mobilization of medical resources is in place. They include streamlining the medical consultation procedures and extending clinics' opening hours to include noon and nighttime periods. Stressing the effectiveness of the current flu vaccines, mainland authorities have urged high-risk groups, including the elderly and children, to get inoculated as soon as possible. Mask wearing is recommended at enclosed or crowded places. Those displaying flu symptoms should not go to school or work. Back in Hong Kong, Secretary for Health Lo Chung-mau also noted the recent rise in respiratory infections in the mainland, when asked if he's worried about imported cases, which could lead to outbreaks locally. The health chief said the flu surge is not just a mainland problem, but a global issue. This month, Hong Kong reported more than 100 cases diagnosed with mild pneumonia bacteria. Lo said the flu infection rates in Hong Kong stand at around 3%, which is relatively low. But because it's the first winter after the mask mandate was lifted, the health chief warns the flu surge might peak again. Pediatrician Patrick Ip said the recent rise in respiratory illnesses in the mainland is starting to affect the city, especially children. Ip said children and the elderly should be vaccinated to minimize the risks of complications. The Security Bureau said the discipline services will assist the police force in ensuring safety during the district council elections on December 10th. On election day, polling stations are scheduled to open from 8:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Undersecretary for Security Michael Chirk said staff from the discipline services will provide assistance to the police to ensure polling day will be smooth and safe. For instance, fire services officers will inspect whether venues are prone to any fire-related risks. The government launched a 3-tier school-based emergency system on Friday. The mechanism came after the city saw an increase in suicidal cases among students. The first tier is to help schools to identify students who may have mental health needs and with a high risk of suicide. The second tier is to organize a support network outside schools with the help of professionals from different sectors. Meanwhile, the third tier focuses on students with severe mental health needs. Schools can refer them to the psychiatric specialist services of the hospital authority. Overseas, the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was committed to achieving its goals of destroying Hamas as a week-long truce ended and the bombings resumed. Gaza officials say around 140 people have been killed and many more injured as airstrikes target areas in Khan Yunis and Rafah. Hamas has also fired rockets into Israel, most of them intercepted. The Red Cross has warned that the fighting will wipe out the minimal relief that was afforded during the truce. Nasir Karim with more.
Palestinians in the Gaza Strip returned to the grim task of picking through rubble in the hope of finding survivors. After a week of respite, the fighting between Israel and Hamas has restarted with desperation on both sides. Muhammad Udwan said he and his brother were returning to a building in Rafah where his uncle and cousins had apartments. On the way there, he said, it was bombed. Then there is this uncle in Tel Aviv on the Israel side, who was hoping the truce would be extended so that his nephew, Itai Sversky, could be freed. Itai was taken from the kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th, and his parents were killed.
It took some time until we got some indication about his condition. And we know right now that he's alive, but he's not in great condition. He's 38 years old, so he's not in the first list, and we need him back soon.
More than 100 hostages were freed during the ceasefire and around 200 Palestinians released from Israeli jails. Qatari officials who had negotiated the initial truce said they were working to restore the pause as Israel and Hamas blamed each other for its collapse. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, before leaving Dubai where he attended COP28, said Israel is obligated to protect civilians in Gaza and ensure humanitarian aid for the population of 2.3 million is resumed.
I made clear that after the pause, it was imperative that Israel put in place clear protections for civilians and for sustaining humanitarian assistance going forward. And as we've seen just today, Israel's already moved out on parts of that, including sending out information, making it clear where people could be in safe areas in Gaza.
The information Blinken is referring to is an online map dividing Gaza into hundreds of numbered parcels. It asks residents to identify the number of their location in case they need to evacuate. Israel is asking residents to move from the south and to the east as they claim to target Hamas hideouts. Reports say the map fails to designate safe areas and is not clear how accessible it is for Palestinians. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Over 2,000 foreign tourists made use of the first day of China's temporary visa-free policy for some countries. For 1 year starting from Friday, China allows visa-free entry for citizens from France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, and Malaysia. They're allowed to stay for no more than 15 days for business, tourism, family visits, and transit purposes. Chinese authorities said over 2,000 overseas travelers entered China on the first day visa-free. Of that, more than 1,100 were from Malaysia. At Berlin's Brandenburg Airport, a flight to Beijing carried 140 passengers on the first day of the new policy.
We're flying to Harbin, Ice Snow World. It's amazing. We heard it's an amazing place, so we are happy to finally travel without visas.
It's a very good news that we can travel very comfortable without visa, without any queue. So just have a ticket and you are in China.
That's great news. First of all, it will be more convenient for myself, but also now I'm able to bring families and friends over there, and I think it's also going to be great for tourism in China.
And still ahead, Audit Commission says it's not picking on the Chinese university after a critical report. World leaders admit the Earth is in crisis during COP28 in Dubai. The first female judge in U.S. Supreme Court, Sandra Day OConnor, dies. Welcome back. Earlier this week, the Audit Commission issued a report that criticized a number of issues at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Director of the Audit Commission, Nelson Lam, said the department will examine all government-funded institutions in the future. Mo Sang-ai reports.
In the report, the Audit Commission focused on the restaurants on the campus of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, pointing out the majority of them sell food to outsiders. The Commission also found problems with tendering for the university's facilities. This is the first time a government-subsidized university has received a value-for-money audit, which examines the economic efficiency of the audited institution. However, the director of the Audit Commission, Nelson Lam, said they were not targeting the CUHK.
所有嘅機構
Lam said the department treats all institutions the same as long as they meet the criteria, such as receiving over half its income from public funding. Meanwhile, the report itself was criticized. For instance, some lawmakers questioned the Commission's conclusions, saying it would not be practical for campus restaurants to serve students and staff only. The director said he welcomes different perspectives and added the examination acts like a body check, reflecting small and big matters with organization that is audited. Lam added a positive ripple effect has been triggered after the Chinese universities report, with some other institutions beginning to perform self-check exercises. News 9, TVB News.
Overseas again, at COP28, or the climate change-related 28th Annual UN Conference of the Parties in Dubai, the developing world took center stage. African leaders said their rainforests are helping to eat up excess carbon dioxide from the air, while their emissions are only a fraction of richer countries. The conference featured more than 150 world leaders gathered in Dubai to present their plans for reducing carbon emissions as they try to avert a climate catastrophe. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris announced Washington will provide $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund. Nasri Karim has details.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said African countries are appealing for support from developed economies to help build climate resilience.
African countries are among the most vulnerable to the effects of a rapidly changing climate and have to adapt and build resilience within the context of historically low levels of development and a severely limited capacity.
U.S. climate envoy John Kerry and French President Emmanuel Macron pushed for more investment in nuclear energy, which does not produce greenhouse gas emissions. More than 20 nations called for a tripling of nuclear energy generated in the world by 2050.
And we have to invest. I'm not saying give away, I'm saying invest the trillions of dollars that are sitting on the sidelines looking for bankable deals, but not willing to move as fast as we need to move.
70% of the electricity in France comes from nuclear energy, and Macron said it should be repeated by other countries.
The IPCC says it is 4 times less carbon intensive than gas, for instance, and equivalent to wind. Second, nuclear energy is also a stable and pilotable form of energy.
One issue almost universally shared was that the Earth is in crisis. The United Nations and environmental groups warned that the planet has recorded the 9 hottest years on record over the past decade. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz put forward an upbeat view of the future. He said the world has what it takes to meet these challenges through technologies such as wind power, e-mobility and green hydrogen. Nasri Karim, TVB News.
In the U.S., the first woman to serve on the nation's highest court passed away on Friday at the age of 93. Retired Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day OConnor died of complications related to advanced dementia and a respiratory illness. She was an unwavering voice of moderate conservatism. This report from NBC News.
Remembered tonight as a pioneer, tributes for U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day OConnor, including Chief Justice John Roberts, saying she blazed a historic trail as our nation's first female justice. She met that challenge with undaunted determination, indisputable ability, and engaging candor.
It's thrilling in a way to be the first to do something, the first woman to ever serve on the court. But it's dreadful if you're the last.
The daughter of a cattle rancher, OConnor grew up in Arizona, a Republican lawmaker and a judge before being nominated to the Supreme Court in 1981, after President Reagan's campaign pledged to nominate a woman.
I was concerned about whether I could do the job well enough to deserve saying yes.
Confirmed unanimously by the Senate, she served on the court for 24 years, holding a pivotal swing vote.
It really was the O'Connor court for more than a decade because she often cast the deciding vote on the most contentious cases.
Sometimes she sided with conservatives, as she did in 2000, settling the presidential election in Bush v. Gore. Other times she was with the liberals, writing the landmark decision on using race in college admissions, one that was largely gutted just last term.
The very heart of this country is equality of opportunity and respect for all individuals.
As a moderate, she searched for consensus on a bitterly divided court, particularly on abortion rights, joining a decision reaffirming Roe v. Wade in 1992, while later upholding state restrictions on abortion. The first woman on the court, also the first mother. She had 3 boys with her husband, John, whom she left the court to care for in 2006 when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Later, she too was diagnosed with the disease. She also battled cancer, reflecting at one point on what that fight taught her.
I think I learned from it to appreciate and treasure each day, because you don't know how many you'll be given. So make those that you have count.
Sandra Day OConnor was 93. Laura Jarrett, NBC News.
Americans buying electric cars are eligible for tax credits worth up to $7,500. However, under the new rules being proposed, this benefit may be removed or limited for cars containing battery materials from China. The new rules passing through Congress may be an obstacle to President Joe Biden, who set a goal to have half of vehicles sold in the U.S. to run on electricity by 2030. Biden's signature will be needed on the new laws, with Americans likely to find it harder to buy electric vehicles or EVs that are eligible for the full tax credit. EV sales have tripled since Biden took office, but the U.S. still relies on foreign sources, especially China, for many of the critical minerals needed to produce batteries. The law doesn't only target China, but other countries considered hostile to the U.S., such as North Korea, Russia, and Iran. Indonesian helpers make up almost half of the foreign domestic workers in Hong Kong, serving as a backbone to many of the city's families. But who should pay the fees charged by agencies to facilitate their work and settlement in Hong Kong? Should the helpers or the employers shoulder the fees? In a 6th part of our Connecting Indonesia series, TVB News spoke to key stakeholders in both Indonesia and Hong Kong about the policy contentions and considerations.
The agency charged me for 4 months my salary, around 3,000 every month. But for some others, the agency charged for 6 months. This is not fair.
Earlier this year, the so-called zero-fee policy for Indonesian domestic helpers have elicited mixed views in Hong Kong. Under it, Hong Kong employers would have to shoulder the agency fees of Indonesian domestic helpers. They include the transport and administration costs and could rack up to some $20,000. In mid-August, the SAR government said any policy change concerning the hiring of helpers here must be conducted on the basis of government-to-government meetings, following a meeting with the Indonesian consulate in Hong Kong. Thomas Chan Tung-Fong, chairman of the Hong Kong Union of Employment Agencies, said it is still possible for the zero-fee policy to be imposed.
This issue was put aside at the moment, but it doesn't mean the Indonesian government give up or totally cancel this kind of policy, because transferring workers' late costs to employers is the national policy.
The SR government noted the extra burdens heaped on Hong Kong employers could in turn affect job opportunities for Indonesian helpers. To look for more sources of helpers, Labour and Welfare Secretary Chris Soon met with consuls general from Cambodia and Bangladesh in August to discuss a possible increase of domestic helpers from these 2 countries. Still, the 140,000 Indonesians account for nearly half of the city's domestic helpers. Around 750 domestic helpers from Bangladesh are now working in Hong Kong, and even fewer from Cambodia. Thomas Chan said it's a global trend that employers bear more of the agency fees for helpers.
If employers in Middle East, they want to hire a Filipino worker and Indonesian worker, on average they have to pay, or they have to offer about $4,500 to $5,000 US. By that way, they totally cover the cost of the workers migrant to other countries. That's why I'm saying try to increase the burden of employer. It's a work train. Now it's only matters of the time.
TVB News also spoke to Indonesian lawmaker Charles Honoris in Jakarta, who told us their government's perspective.
If they are economically well, then they would choose not to work as domestic workers abroad, which is why I think ethically and morally we cannot also impose, charges to them to be able to go abroad.
Charles Horners also told us he hopes to upskill the labor force in Indonesia, including those working overseas as domestic helpers. In that way, despite the increased cost, foreign domestic helpers who can speak Cantonese or have better skill sets could still appeal to Hong Kong employers who need help to care for their families. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.